Welcome to Make It Happen with me, your host, Maggie. This week's episode is part 2 of my incredibly insightful interview with 5th generation rancher AJ Richards. If you're tuning in this week and missed part 1, make sure that you go check out episode number 22, Food in America, Supply Chain, Nutrition, and More with AJ Richards. Like I said, it's super insightful and informative. If this is your first time listening to the Make It Happen podcast, thank you so much for being here. I am Maggie, an American College of Sports Medicine exercise physiologist and creator of No Excuse 15-minute at-home workouts. My goal is to make daily fitness for busy humans achievable, so that's what I've set out to do. I have nearly 70 workouts available for free on Amazon Video, as well as a membership option at fitnessmaggie.com with additional workout programs, nutrition tools, and a private community for 24/7 support, amongst other things. I started this podcast to help simplify the path to improving your health with impactful fitness, nutrition, and health tools and information that can help make a difference. And today's episode is packed full of good stuff for you to soak up. Today, AJ and I discuss everything from health issues that are very real in America, fasting, homesteading, behavioral change science, the gut microbiome, food labels, and how AJ is helping to bridge the gap to help provide people a more convenient way to get quality food. So let's dive in. With your nutrition background and with CrossFit, you said you also done some fasting. I heard that somewhere. Okay, so big fan of fasting over here, and I talk about it a lot on this podcast and with my members base and all of that. But I think that something I wanted to ask you was, obviously there's a weight problem in America, there's a health problem in America from, chronic disease and everything. In a recent episode, I talked a bit about how the integration of both fasting and having more in the way of quality whole foods, non-processed foods, can not only lower your grocery bill, but also help with this. So I know we've talked a lot about the whole foods and where they're coming from and the actual micronutrient content, but also maybe with fasting, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, if you maybe agree, or just any thoughts you have on.
Yeah, I do agree. We live in a world of excess. I mean, that's just the reality, right? My personal food habits is I eat primarily just dinner. I'll have a little bit of something in the morning. Now I've lost a lot of lean mass. I'm down 10 pounds. But I think about it like in the context of, well, I had 10 pounds when I ran a gym because that was my lifestyle. That's what I did, right? I was eating and training for function in terms of function in the gym. Mm-hmm. Well, when I was homesteading in Cody, our home is in Cody, Wyoming. We're just in southern Utah right now while I'm consulting for a new slaughterhouse. Okay. I could go all day, feel really good, and have my primary meal be dinner, and eat a big dinner, and maybe have some other light snacks throughout the day, maybe a little bit of something in the morning to get going, just to put something in my stomach. I feel better being lower in weight. We currently live in a world, and hopefully this lasts for longer, but we currently live in a world where we get to focus on eating for size and mass and aesthetics over function. And when I say function, I don't mean CrossFit functional fitness or functional fitness in general. That's not functional in terms of real life doing things. That's functional in the gym. Like that's a shift for my own knowledge, right? Because when I'm homesteading, throwing bales, dragging calves, flipping logs, doing those things that actually have to be done to function on the land, I don't need to bench 300 pounds. I don't need to be 205 pounds at 13% body mass. I look good, but it doesn't make me perform any better or worse. And if my food let's take the context of, if I can't afford a lot of food, a lot of healthy food, I only need one really good, healthy meal a day to do all the things that my body requires me to do. Our ancestors didn't eat 3 giant ass meals a day. Sorry for swearing. They didn't
snack all day. They didn't have small meals. Yeah, right.
Matter of fact, they probably took a little knapsack out into the field with them of what they had left over from dinner. And they might have taken a short break just to put something in their belly and kept going, but they didn't eat until they got home at night and had the big meal that was prepared ready for them with highly nutrient dense food that was grown on their own land or from their neighbor in barter.
Right.
So when you said in the beginning, like some ideas for people to think about their food, the simplest thing to do is if what you're reading on the ingredients, and this is probably a broken record for you sometimes,
Broken
one
records are
word.
good. You need that
Yeah.
repetition.
Yeah. Look at your meal, and everything in the meal should have one word: potato, tomato, carrot, lettuce, broccoli, if you eat those kinds of things, beef, not chuck roast and then all these other additives. Chuck roast.
Even if it says less than 2% of.
Yes, it's not natural if that's what's in
Yeah.
there. So that's the best way. Like when you look at if I sit down for a plate of food and I look around the plate, I should be able to identify everything on the plate,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It might be mashed potatoes with cheese, but I know there's mashed potatoes, cheese, and whole milk, raw dairy that made those mashed potatoes. Like I know what's in everything on my plate. If I went and bought a box of au gratin potatoes and made that up, I don't know what's in there. I can identify a potato chip. People don't know au gratin potatoes are. I don't even know that's why that came into my head. Let's just say mashed potatoes. Let's say mashed potatoes from a
I know
box,
what they
right?
are.
Yeah, yeah. For the listener that
Yeah.
doesn't know, let's say I bought boxed mashed potatoes. If you turn the box over, it probably doesn't say potatoes. It probably
Yes.
says potatoes and 20 other things on there,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That's the simplest way that I can help people try to understand what you should be shifting your diet to.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that so much of, and it's not just about the fact that it's potatoes, but that all those other things mean that the potatoes have been processed down so much and there's all these
Yes.
other added chemicals or ingredients that, quite frankly, our body doesn't need to function. And going back to that function piece, I love what you said about like being able to function in the gym versus being able to function just doing your daily life. Now, not everybody's daily life is what you are doing.
Right.
Obviously, so much of our nation is sitting at a desk most of the day or having some kind of a sedentary job. So maybe, the gym is the best example of how they can function. But when you talk about picking up your kids or just carrying in groceries or
Yes.
taking the stairs or like these little small things that we don't really think about until we throw our back out and
Mm-hmm.
we can't pick up the kids or we can't pick up the groceries. And so I guess the big picture, obviously that's kind of the fitness side, but so much of that fuel to be able to have your muscles be healthy and your joints be lubricated and all of that comes from the proper nutrition and the micronutrients and all of that.
I think your distinction of your lifestyle and what you do is an important one, right? If
Yeah.
you're in security, like I said, food, shelter, and safety. If you're in the safety space and you're in security, it doesn't hurt to be 250 pounds and bench 300 pounds, right? Depending on your
Mhm.
role. So
Yeah.
it's context. So
Yes,
being functional in the gym
absolutely.
could help on the security side, or if you're in military, special forces, law enforcement, there is a translation there. So I don't want to blanket the whole statement that way, but by and large, look at your lifestyle. What are you being asked to do, and what's the most
Yeah.
functional ability for you in that particular lifestyle?
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree more with you on that. I think that you're right. It's a blessing, I guess, that we live in a world that we can have so much focus on the aesthetics of what a gym or what a
Mm-hmm.
workout routine can do for us and what
Mm-hmm.
foods can do for us as far as like, macronutrients and all of that. But when it comes down to it, how you feel and your health in the long term is what it all comes down to. I mean, I've seen it over and over, and I'm sure you have as well. When you shift your eating, which isn't easy to do, if you're used to going through a drive-through or buying these convenient foods, it's not easy to shift to
Right.
what
Right.
we're suggesting.
Right.
But with everything, things take time, and you
Yep.
notice those differences over time. You notice that you may not feel as hungry all day long if
Yeah.
you're integrating fasting and you're eating whole foods that are actually satiating, and
Mm-hmm.
the list goes on and on. Now, what
Yeah.
would you say? You say you eat one meal a day. What's like a perfect meal for you? I'm curious because you're not a carnivore. You eat other
Yeah.
things. What's like a typical meal for you? I just want to know.
Yeah. I definitely eat meat in every meal. So steak for sure. So it's on the plate. Don't get me wrong. The steak's on the plate. And there are many times where I will just eat a steak because I'm busy and don't want to make all the other things. I'm just not a dedicated carnivore, it's just
Yeah.
it's a timing thing. But so like a typical meal for me would be steak and a big old glass of raw milk.
Okay.
And if I'm I mean, you asked me what's a typical meal. I've got a weird life right now, so
I want to hear. I want to know all
I'm
about your
just well,
typical.
I'm just a I'm just kind of bachelor in it because
Oh, that you're
I
traveling and
yes, yes.
not in
So
your
like
usual routine.
if I'm at home though, my wife makes some of the most incredible food. Like she'll do um she likes like oh, what do you call it? Like Indian food. So she'll make
Oh, okay.
homemade noodles with homemade broth, with homemade, all of the things where everything we can see, we know exactly what it's in. So when she'll do that kind of stuff, um, uh, sweet potatoes, something with lots of sweet potatoes. We grew our own garden when we got to our homestead last year. So anything with tomatoes and lettuce and peppers and squash,
Awesome.
and we grew those kind of things. So yeah, sometimes she'll do kamut. So we buy whole berry kamut, we mill it
Okay.
ourselves, so that we get all of that. We don't sift anything out of it. We mill it so it goes into the bread, and she'll do homemade bread with kamut.
Yum.
Um, and with that kamut, she's done some noodles with that as well that turned out really well. It's a long process, so it's not all the time, but um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
she
sounds
just
good.
spends a lot of time making sure that everything that she's putting in there, all the spices, all the herbs, everything, we know exactly what it is. But me
Okay.
personally, when I'm on the road myself, it's I'll do taco salad, like taco salads.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll have terrible food for me, which is a tortilla, but um, taco salads are easy with the tomatoes and stuff like that.
And do you say terrible because it's a store-bought processed
Yeah, it's a
tortilla
yeah,
that
exactly. It's a processed tortilla, which I will look at the ingredients. I'm like, oh, no, I shouldn't be eating this,
yeah.
but I like to have a tortilla in there somewhere.
And I mean, really, like moderation, right? Like there is
That's right.
power in you're not
Yeah,
eating that every day. And
that's right.
I mean, I don't know which tortillas you're buying, but I'm going to guess
Yeah,
that maybe it's not the worst thing in the world for you to
yeah.
consume.
No, no.
And you're right, the taste. I mean, there's something about living and being happy with the food you're eating. So if
That's
that
right.
helps to boost,
Yeah.
we're here to live. We're not here to, which we need to live healthfully. So that's finding that
Yes.
balance here between all of this um, and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about a lot about like making homemade, whether it's breads or whatever. And so this is just a quick aside. So my sister and I grew up outside of Indianapolis in a suburb. So we
Okay.
grew up very suburban, not city, but not country, like not
Yep.
rural in any means. And now I
Hmm.
live very rural or very country, very city, excuse me. I'm
Hmm.
urban. My sister is super rural. She's in Southeast Ohio, and she and her family have actually done the homestead thing, and now they're growing as much food as they can, and they have cows, and they're doing chickens, and they have pigs, and the whole shebang. So I feel like so much of what I have experienced and learned from her has been so powerful to me because again, we didn't grow up this way, and I think that um, is just kind of a piece of we're all raised differently, right? We don't have necessarily the not everybody has been blessed to be raised in a way that maybe even teaches anything about nutrition or anything about healthy living. And it's up to us to educate ourselves. Well, I think it's
Yeah.
important for people to kind of put their routines aside and like the everything that they've been taught that they know sometimes aside because without an open mind we can't learn things, which is what I was so excited to have you on here for today, is because I think what you're doing with connecting people to shake the hand that feeds you, I think that's such a powerful and important piece of the pie. And not that everybody's going to jump in and do it right away, or maybe even they don't jump in and do it all the time, but they start incorporating more wholesome and
Yes.
regeneratively raised or naturally raised animals and crops, and
Yeah.
then as a country, the awareness we can even become more educated and aware. And awareness does a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, behavioral change science means we change one thing at a time until it becomes a habit.
Yes.
When people get discouraged, when I was coaching for Chris and his clients, I'd have people that 100 pounds or more to lose, right? And we would do an initial assessment, like how much soda you're drinking. It's like 10 cans of soda a day. And it's like, okay, I didn't ask them to stop drinking soda. That would never work. I said, can you do 9? I could do
Yeah.
9.
Yep.
Okay, can you do 8 after 2 weeks of just 9 cans? Yeah, I could do 8.
Mhm.
At some point, they build momentum. And actually, you know what? I don't want to go 1 can at a time. I'll just do one a day. Perfect. Do one a day. Like the expectations are, I don't expect you to like change your whole life because that doesn't work. It doesn't last. You have,
No.
your ego and your identity are working in cahoots. Your ego's only job is to maintain the identity that you have. And
Yeah.
when we as people think, the way I would teach my clients is like, the reason you're going to McDonald's is because you look in the mirror and you say, I'm fat. You see a fat person in the mirror.
And you behave accordingly.
Yes. So what do fat people do? They go through McDonald's drive-through. The only reason an athlete doesn't go through the McDonald's drive-thru is because they see themselves as an athlete. If we can help you change the way you view yourself, even if you're not there yet, you will start making choices differently because you're seeing yourself differently. That's behavior change science. And so even
Amen.
this whole conversation, right? Just start with one thing. Don't try to change everything. I'm not advocating that you do because you'll fail. I was talking to a guy who had a pet goat, and his pet goat, we had a bottle baby, they call him. So we're feeding this. We
Oh.
had a pet goat too. He had a diaper on, running around the house. They're the cutest, funniest animals you can
Oh,
have around. Now they get a
so
certain age and
cute.
you don't want anywhere near you, but so he had this pet goat, and he would feed it food scraps all the time. And one day this goat stopped eating food scraps. It just wouldn't touch him. It'd go up, look at him, and walk away.
Hmm.
But he would go outside, and so he's like, maybe something's wrong. To go outside and would eat the vegetation that was around. Our bottle baby, our little goat, we have a milkweed that grew on the property that if they eat it, they will die. It's poison. And so
Oh,
I had
okay.
his name was Jack. So I had Jack out there jumping around with me in the field, and I watched him because we, as people that work with animals, the animals have a natural sense of what's good for them and what's not for the most part. And
Okay.
so I was watching him in this area where this milkweed was, and then other vegetation. And I watched him put his nose up to it, and I was getting ready, I was there to grab him if he tried. And he turned and looked and ate the thing next to it, wouldn't touch it.
Hmm.
So then this gentleman tells me the story about his pet goat that wouldn't eat the food scraps. And we don't know the answer for sure, but it had me start thinking they have a natural ability to know if something's of value for them. And so here this guy, and he said, and that's what his belief was, that it wouldn't touch it because it was hollow, void of nutrients. These are like bell peppers and just lettuces or something that he had left over, and it wouldn't eat it. I
Hmm.
think it was just because when it went up to smell it, there was no energy coming back to it that said this is something that is going to feed you.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. That's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting, and I think very telling too. I think we probably would have the power to do the same, but we've kind of lost that somewhere along the way. I think most of us.
We haven't even talked about the microgut biome, which is fed
Yes.
by your food, by the nutrients in your food. And then, they say your microgut biome is your first brain.
Hmm.
What you feed the microbiology of your gut triggers your emotional state. Your hormones are affected by that. And so that's another reason those foods are so important, because we are functioning, that all the decisions we're making, we make them based off of what we fed our bodies to be able to think clearly, function clearly. My friend RC that I was telling you about, he's got a really great way of looking at it. He says, what's the value when it comes to the cost you're spending in your food? What's the value of a good idea? If you're stuck in a position where you can't get ahead and you have all these ambitions and goals and dreams, but you feel stuck and you're eating processed food because it's cheap, and you're like, man, if I could just break through, I know I could do better for my family financially and all of these certain things.
Hmm.
It's important to shift the thought process that your food is an investment. What is the value of a good idea? Are you willing to invest in the value of a good idea? And again, it goes back to the core, which is our microgut biome. The same thing that's in the soil that makes the food nutrient dense. Like they say, you can take a teaspoon of soil or a tablespoon of soil, and there are more organisms than there are stars in the sky that you can see. That's how little
Hmm.
we know about our soil.
Wow.
So when you're looking for the right food, there's a really good book called Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf. A lot of people in the fitness space will know from Rob from a books he's written on paleo.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a book called Sacred Cow. They wanted to prove that grass-fed beef was better for you than corn and grain-finished beef.
Okay.
They found that the difference in nutrient levels was not enough to vilify beef in general. Like your nutrient values in eating red meat, even if it's the cheap stuff from Walmart, is still much better than not eating it at all. Now, that beef is going to have antibiotics in it, most likely. It's going to have who knows what kind of vaccines that's going to be in that beef. There's many reports now showing microplastics in the meat. To the everyday consumer, if I said I have if I have grass-fed beef, you think it's been fed grass its whole life. That's not true on the label laws. If that animal's been given grass for half of its life, I can label it grass-fed.
For half of its life.
Yep. I can't label it grass-finished, but I can label it grass-fed. And because you, the consumer, are so busy with your life, you don't have time to dive into all the nuances. You think, oh, grass-fed, this is the best for me. It might have been grass-fed and then corn and grain finished, and you don't know.
So is that happening the same thing, which is kind of all labeling across the board?
Mm-hmm. And really as far as like the organic conversation, it's become too expensive for a lot of small producers because you have to pay for these certifications. It's really hard to do because if I want to be a certified organic ranch, but I have to buy feed from somebody else and they use herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, well, now I'm no longer certified organic because I brought that product in.
So complex.
Yeah, so complex. That's real. At the end of the day, here's what I've learned. I am not an expert, and there is no expert because the complexity of our food supply chain is so complex. It's just impossible. Now you can find an expert in feedlots. You can find an expert in regenerative agriculture. You can find an expert in chicken. You can find an expert, but then I promise you, if you ask them, I heard you're the expert, they're going to say, oh, I'm not an expert. Why? Because maybe they're not the expert in the soil. Maybe because the person who's only studying soil for their whole life, they'll be the expert in soil, but maybe they're not an expert in rain cycles, right? Yeah. So it is that complex. So what I like to say is that I've made it a point to try to shake the hand of the experts in every area. And I just talk about it enough to maybe get myself in trouble because I say some things wrong. I'm always willing to learn more, right? But just get people to start thinking and then asking questions. Yeah. The safe bet is that don't trust anything you read on the label. Shake the hand that's our slogan is shake the hand that feeds you. You go to the grocery store. Like I go to restaurants. When I go to like a steakhouse, I'll ask the waitress, do you know where this came from? Most of the waitresses don't know, but they'll go ask. And then when they come back and tell me, I will Google the company they say they got it from. And most of the time it's a label under one of the big four or some, big companies. And then I just won't order it because I'm committed to being for the producers, not for the large companies. And that's just me. I don't expect everybody to jump on that bandwagon, but that's just what I do, right? But if you can ask the person that raises it how their practices are, that is your best bet. Don't trust labels, because what happens is you have lobbyists pushing for certain opportunities to change the way things are, the requirements, so that they can label what the next big, buzzword is, like certified organic, right? So anytime a big company gets involved in that, like right now, it's called greenwashing. That's the term, greenwashing. They're going to greenwash grass-fed beef. Now it can't be just grass-fed. It has to be grass-fed and finished to be labeled. Don't make it simple. The one thing that should not be so convenient in your life, the one thing that shouldn't be comfortable or super convenient is sourcing your food. Find the people out. If you're in the city, you can't raise livestock in the city. I get it. But around every city are rural communities with locals trying to make it work so they can be there for you. Take a freaking drive and go meet them. We're building a software to simplify some of that because I understand human behavior. And human behavior is the path of least resistance. And if we're going to get large scale adoption to shift how we do things, you got to kind of meet people where they're at. Our slogan is shake the hand that feeds you. If you do that, you can ask them directly.
Yes, tell us about what you're doing to
Mhm.
try to kind of, I see it as bridging the gap more or
That's
less,
right.
like in making it a little easier for people to do as you're recommending to get the best quality food in their mouths and on the table for their family.
Yeah. So this software called From the Farm, excuse me, fromthefarm.io is where you can go to sign up for when we release in March. Um, it will populate the people closest to you raising food. If I don't have anybody close to you, I've got relationships with processing facilities in the beef space that can ship it to you until we onboard somebody close to you. It'll be a process, right? We're trying to change a food system that has existed since the 80s. It's not happening overnight. And
Right. And it's
because,
not out yet, but March, you're
yeah, in
saying.
March. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And because I don't want to have the opportunity for one of the big companies to come in and buy us out, we're only doing this. We're going to launch with I mean, it's already pre-seed is done, and we're going to launch through crowdfunding to scale it because I do not want to be influenced by corporate greed and or anybody that, because if we do really well, JBS will come along and be like, hey, I'll give you $1 billion to buy you out. That's not why I'm doing this. So I'm doing this so on my deathbed, I look at my grandkids and know they've got small farms and ranches to buy from. So with that being said, you can go on order, make that connection, and then we're going to set up a franchise or a system of farmers markets where you can, so they can come into town. You go to the farmer's market, you've already paid for it, check off the list, go home, and they go back their way. We can reduce material waste, boxes, insulation, dry ice, because now it's an exchange like the old milkman. You know, they used to put crates of bottles on your porch and take the other one away. I'll show up at the
Yep.
farmer's market. If I'm selling beef, I've got a reusable freezer bag. I hand you that one full, you hand me your empty one, and we see each other the next week or whatever
Okay.
frequency you order, right? So that's the system that we're putting in place to help people. Because listen, I lived in Phoenix for 12 years. I
Yeah,
know, I know that's difficult. And I know that we kind of go through life taking for granted our food supply chain, you know?
absolutely.
So
And
that's
it becomes so
things we're
much
looking at.
routine, right? Like anything else,
Yeah.
like if you want it to be a priority, you come up with some kind of routine that I guess somehow you find that balance of making it relatively convenient. But again, like that routine, so much of what we do is convenience, yes, but building a routine. And if we
Yes.
know something's important. Thank you for sharing more about the business. I did want to ask, I know you said you're launching in March
Yep.
of this year, 2024. Are you
Mm-hmm.
launching nationwide? Are you starting in a certain area? Can you tell more about how people could find? I know you mentioned your website. Share it again, and just
Yep.
more about the process here to start.
Yeah, great question. So we will launch. We have a launch strategy, so it won't be nationwide,
Okay.
and that's just going to be based on the producers that we get on board and where they're at. So as we get more producers across the nation, we'll open up across the nation. You know, one of the most common questions I get is, "What about the East Coast?" Um, Frankly, East
There
Coast,
we are.
you guys are in big trouble. Like you need to start connecting. Like I don't know how else to say it, but the most population in our nation is in the East Coast, and the least amount of food being grown is in the East Coast.
Ah,
So we're working on
okay.
it. We'll get there. Now it's just a matter of getting producers on board and letting them connect with you guys. So we'll launch in where I'm at first, because it's where I'm at and that's where the relationships are. So it's
Makes sense.
Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada. Like we're just going to go basically north to south because I can connect everybody along that area, and we'll start there. As people onboard, it's from thefarm.io. You can go and sign up to be notified when we're in your area. We'll be able to see where the highest demand is, and I can direct my energy to bringing those together where the most people are, right? So
Okay.
Florida is a question I get all, you know, lots of people in Florida that ask on all the time, lots of people in New York, um, lots of people in Illinois. I get those kind of questions a lot from those areas. So
Okay.
we can see where the hot spots are, and we'll grow that way. I mean, I'll deploy an entire team of people to just go make it happen sooner than later if we can get that kind of support. Find the farmer. Here's a good tip. Go to Google. Google
Google's
wherever you
good.
live. Google your city and local beef. And the first place you go when you go to the website is the about section. Don't go to their
Okay.
store. A steak is a steak is a steak. Don't go to their store. Go to their about section, read about the family, and see if it speaks to you. And you'll be able to tell, like, rancher, if it's a really well done website, it's probably you want to make sure that maybe it's really well done because they're a bigger operation and they've put in the work in.
Okay.
but most ranchers are not awesome website builders. So I don't want you to be turned off by a crappy website. That might mean the best food. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, no, that's good. That's a good tip. So I
But
need to
don't,
Google Baltimore local beef and
yes.
find the worst website. No, just
Yeah.
joking. And look
Yeah.
at the about and just
Yeah.
kind of read about the family, their
Yes.
story. It's gonna have
Yes. They'll
okay.
post their story. Now, I want to be careful in that, because if you go to whiteoakspastures.com, they're friends of mine. They're a family run operation and their website is very professional. So I'm not saying don't shop from a professional website. I'm just saying
Okay.
if you find one that's not really well built, it doesn't mean they don't raise good livestock or good
Don't be
food.
scared away by
Yeah.
that.
But
Okay.
read the about section, get to know them. If it's about an individual family, that's your first best bet. If it's a family that's grown their business to where it's the brand, that's not a bad thing. Just do a little bit of research that way. So that's
Okay.
a tip I can give the listeners to start sourcing.
No, that sounds great. Okay, so we talked about where people can find you, how they can learn more. I am on the list, so hopefully the
Oh,
Baltimore
awesome.
little thing can
Yeah.
grow. Everybody and
We got
over here on the East Coast,
yeah.
put your name
Come
and
on, come
email
on,
in.
Baltimore.
Yeah, come on, Baltimore. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will share those, your how people can find you on social media. I will link those in the show notes just so that
Awesome.
make sure people see them. Yeah, no, but I just want to thank you so much for being here today and for giving me your time. An incredible interview and first guest for me to have on this podcast. I
Awesome.
appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Maggie.
All
I
right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I certainly hope today's episode has sparked your curiosity and that you feel motivated to start making some healthy changes and adjustments to your life. And I'm talking to you no matter who you are, because we can all always make improvements. The moment you think you've got it all figured out is the moment that you'll start backtracking. Stay hungry to learn, and remember that this path to healthy living and feeling our best is always evolving. In closing, I want to remind you to kick any overwhelm that you might feel from all of the awesome info given in today's episode. Pick 1 to 2 things that you'd really like to focus on improving and master them. Then, when you're ready for more, add on. That's the secret to successfully making change happen. And you're worth the process and the time it'll take. Until next time, friends, go make it happen.